But to kick us off, I'm going to have Beca Bailey with the Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing come up and say welcome and greet the group.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Beca Bailey. I am the Community Engagement Liaison for the Arizona Commission for the Deaf and the Hard of Hearing, and I am so honored to be up here on this stage. I was really pleasantly surprised when Sarah asked if I would do some opening remarks, and at first I really wanted to say no, but I do have a story to share. So I want to give you just a little bit of an overview on ACDHH first, so that you have an understanding of our agency and our mission, and then I will share my story. As we take time today to think about our role as partners in this preparedness effort, it is something that we take very seriously, and we have a lot of work to do to consider how the different organizations, including the Commission, can partner with our emergency preparedness agencies. So I like to think not only within the shelter, but beyond the shelter. What can we do holistically to be better, to be more inclusive, to be more integrated, so that people with disabilities can better respond to emergencies on their own and not be left behind? It is very important that we include those subject matter experts at the table, so to speak. So as I mentioned, I wanted to go over ACDHH. How many of you are familiar with ACDHH? Show of hands if you don't mind. Okay, so a few of you, very good. Well, then I will make this quick. I'd like you to know about us so that you can also learn how you can partner with us. We are a state agency established in 1977, and the mission was to improve the quality of life for people with hearing loss. That includes people who are culturally deaf, deaf-blind, have a combined vision and hearing loss, as well as those who are hard of hearing. So those are the populations that the Commission works with primarily. And I distinguish each of those groups because even though they have a similar issue of hearing loss, the needs of each of those groups are actually quite distinct. So it's important that we all be mindful that addressing those needs is going to look a little bit different depending on the individual. I want to give you some statistics regarding hearing loss. There are over 1.1 million people in the state of Arizona that have some level of hearing loss. What most people don't realize is that hearing loss is the #1 disability in the world, and in the state of Arizona, in every state, actually. If you look at all of those numbers, in Arizona alone, we're looking at 1.1 million people. There are about 20,000 to 30,000 people in Arizona who are culturally deaf and use sign language as their primary mode of communication. Those who we call hard of hearing typically don't know sign language. There are thousands of people in the state with a combined vision and hearing loss. We're working on getting a little bit more accurate number of that population, and we will report that as soon as we do. There's a quote that I want to share by June Isaacson Kales. She says that disasters are always inclusive. Response and recovery is not, unless we plan for it. And again, I want to emphasize that it is critical to include us, the populations with disabilities, at the table and in the conversation. We obviously need to consider equal access, physical access, and what's most important for the deaf and hard of hearing population is communication access. Now, I can't tell you how many times in our community those of us with hearing loss walk into a situation, particularly a disaster, and we're kind of following the crowd, but we're completely lost and we're not getting any of the information that's being shared. And it is a very scary experience for us. I have experienced that personally, and that's what I want to share just briefly. A few years ago, I was asked to be involved with the Sky Harbor Airport exercise, and it was a mock plane crash. So I was more than happy to go. There were a lot of different people with disabilities, access and functional needs who attended the exercise. So we were on the runway, and we had to get off of the bus. Really, the bus was to simulate the plane. And there was just a lot of chaos and a lot of people walking around, and I'm kind of standing there watching all of these people talk, and I was completely lost. I didn't know what to do. And then all of a sudden, I see a man with a badge. He must have been someone with authority, I suppose. So I walked over to him, and I was trying desperately to read his lips and get some information, but it just was not working. You know, smartphones at the time were still relatively new, at least to me. It was pretty old school, by the way, so it was a little bit of a struggle, but I realized, okay, there's got to be something that my phone can do. So I opened my Notes app on my phone, and I clicked the little microphone button, and I walked over to this guy, and I put my phone in his face. And of course, at first, he's like, what is this lady doing? And I said, I was gesturing to him, talk into the phone, talk into the phone. And so he eventually figured it out. I was gesturing that I'm deaf, and so he got it and started talking into the phone, and I was able to read on my app what he was saying. And that made my life and my anxiety so much better, just because I had some basic information. I didn't know what was happening in the moment or what was happening next. There was transportation to another location that I wasn't aware of, and I didn't know what that transportation was for. So it is important that all of us keep that in mind. Emergencies, disasters, everyone's busy, everyone has responsibility, and it's difficult to pay one-on-one attention to any individual, and I do understand that. But for those of us with hearing loss, please take a little time, take a little patience, give us that information, just at least so we know what's happening and we can get through the situation safely. Another thing about that situation was when I gave the gentleman my phone to talk into, someone else in the group looked at me and realized that I was deaf. It so happened that she had a son who had autism, and so she knew a little bit of sign language and some finger spelling. Bless her heart, she took me under her wing and stayed with me and signed as best that she could to make sure that I was included, and she tried to let me know what the announcements were so I didn't feel like I had to walk up to this person and shove my phone in their face every time they said something. We were transported to a few different areas, and of course I kept saying, I need an interpreter, I need an interpreter. However, in disasters, it almost never happens until later. An interpreter will probably show up at the end. So I was doing the best I could to get by with what I had. So that was my experience with that disaster exercise. Fast forward a few years later. I don't know if you're familiar with the program under DEMA, the Arizona Department of Emergency and Military Affairs, but they established what is called the ERIC program. It is the Emergency Response Interpreter Credentialing Program. It was actually created by ACDHH in partnership with DEMA. And the goal of it was to make sure that interpreters and captioners, like you see right here on the screen, captioning for hard of hearing individuals. Of course, as I mentioned, hard of hearing folks generally don't know sign language, so captioning is accessible for them. The program was created to make sure that captioners and interpreters were provided during disasters. In early stages, we partnered with the Department of Forestry and Fire Management to respond to wildfires, but as we've gone on, we've added capability of those providers. And so our goal is that regardless of the disaster, whether it's a flood, whether it's a fire, whatever it is we're facing, if it's even extreme heat like we're facing right now, we have those providers available to provide communication. Now you know, there is a program, talk to DEMA. Please feel free to get in touch with them, they'll work with your agency, with your organization. If you need an interpreter, if you need a captioner, they know what to do. So make sure that you're providing effective communication. In closing, I want to again emphasize how important this situation is. I applaud our emergency managers and all of the hard work that they do to serve a very diverse community with very diverse needs. It is not an easy job, and I do recognize that. There is always room for improvement. We can always do better. I want to let you know that the Commission does have a booth out in the lobby. Please feel free to come and visit at the booth, take some information, some business cards, talk to me about how we can be a better partner for you to make sure that we are collectively improving the quality of life for those who are deaf and hard of hearing. And with that, I thank you for your time.